Hello and welcome to video number 18. This is me learning how to use the Digitone II and passing on to you everything I learn as I learn it. The idea behind this video is to try to demystify the whole idea of using LFOs and to give you some practical demonstrations of how to use them. In this way we'll take the fear out of LFOs, if you like. This mod key was labelled LFO on the Digitone I and the Digitone I. But as the term LFO in itself is pretty misleading, I guess that Elektron decided to relabel it mod, short for modulation, on this machine and the Digitone II. So let's try and understand this term LFO. I'm sure, like me, you've watched loads of videos on LFOs and what they actually are, and I'm sure you know that LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. The term LFO, low frequency oscillator, is misleading because we think of an oscillator on a synthesizer as something that makes the basic sound, like a sine wave or a square wave. And LFO does make sound, it's just that humans can't hear it because it's so low. It is what we call a control signal that operates at frequencies below the range of human hearing. That's below 20 Hertz. At 20 Hertz, the air moves backwards and forwards 20 times per second. So 1 Hertz, the air moves backwards and forwards once per second. You get the idea. So it makes more sense to call this a modulator, something that changes other things. So let's be clear, the LFO doesn't make a sound that we can hear, but it does alter parameters on your synthesizer. So what is modulation on a synthesizer? It simply means changing the value of a parameter. In other words, turning something up or down over time. If I turn the sound up and down using the main volume control, I am modulating the volume, and I could do this at different speeds, you see? So that's what an LFO does, but of course you don't need a hand to do it, the machine does it automatically. The speed that the LFO changes the parameter is called the rate. Now you can set a destination parameter, and that's the thing you want to change for each LFO, and it's this parameter that gets changed by the LFO. We've got 3 modulators on the Digitone II. We've got modulator 1, modulator 2, modulator 3. Modulator 2, that's what we're looking at here, can even modulate a parameter in modulator 1. So if I push down on the D encoder, we see the list of destinations. If I go to the bottom, you can see that modulator 1 is a destination. All these parameters in modulator 1 can be a destination for modulator 2. Similarly, we go to modulator 3, push down on the D encoder, scroll to the bottom, and we can see modulator 2 parameters and modulator 1 parameters. One of those can be modulated by modulator 3, so modulators can modulate modulators. Right, so it's all pretty crazy stuff, but we're going to strip this right back so you're definitely going to understand it, so don't worry. So unlike audio producing oscillators, the job of an LFO is to modulate or change the parameter of a sound, for instance a filter cutoff or a volume control. Now you can get to these mods or LFOs like I've shown you by repeatedly pressing the mod key, 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, or we can use the down arrows and up arrows. See? It's worth noting that whenever you return to the mod key from another area, so supposing I go to modulator 2, right, and I come over here to the trig key, and I come back to the modulator key, it's gone back to modulator 1. And be careful of that, because I have found that I've been busily changing a modulator thinking I was still on that, for instance modulator 2, and it's gone back to modulator 1, so be very careful of that. Right, so I'm going to show you some practical applications of using the modulators or LFOs. I'm going to use track 9. On track 9 I've got this hidden tears sound, which, as I've said many times, is the first sound in our list when we go to our presets. This sound here, and as you can see I've just got one trig on the first step of this 1 bar pattern. If I play the pattern, that's all we hear. An unbroken sound, very, very straightforward. I can hear that sound by pressing play. or I can come out of this and just press the track 9 key to hear that sound. Now at the moment, if we look at our modulators, look at this depth control. It's off right up in the middle at 12 o'clock on all 3 modulators. So no LFOs are being applied currently. Let's just make sure you've got the same settings as me. On the trig key, no changes, just leave that as it is. Now if I hold function and the syn key, I'm actually going to the machine page, and if I press the right arrow, I'm in the list of the filters, and you can see the white spot is by legacy, low pass, high pass, so that's the filter we're using. If you haven't got the same one and you want to follow along, then change yours to that. Go to the filter page. Here I've cranked up the frequency with the E encoder, and I've moved the resonance up a bit. This is just to make the sound a bit sharper so we can hear it, and we're using the low pass filter. If I rotate the G encoder, it goes from off to high pass to low pass. Low pass is what we want. Turn the envelope up a bit. In the amp, set the attack to 0 so the sound comes straight in. I've got no effects set at all, so that brings us to the mod page. Now on LFO 1, let's make sure we're on the right one. Here we go, LFO 1. These are the settings that I've made. Now if I push down on the A encoder, you'll see the speed is set to 32. The multiplier is set to BPM 32, and I'll explain all this in a minute. There's a cross on the fade, so there's no fade in or fade out at the moment, but we'll deal with this later. Now the destination, the all-important thing that we're going to change, if I push down on the D encoder, you will see it set to amp volume. I'll say yes, just to make sure we've got that locked in. You can see it's in the box there, amp vol. Down on the lower row, we've got all these waveforms we can choose with the E encoder. I've set this to square wave because this cuts in really quickly, really sharply, so we can hear it incredibly quickly. And the SPH set with the F encoder is set on 0. This is where the waveform starts, and we'll just have it starting at 0. Now the G encoder controls the mode of the waveform. I've got it set on trig. There's all these, free, trig, hold, 1, half. I've got it set on trig. This mode restarts the waveform when a note is triggered. So every time the note sounds, it restarts the waveform. And the depth, DEP, I'm going to crank this all the way up, right the way up to 127.98. Why it isn't 128, I don't know. There's obviously some mathematical reason for that. That's full on. And the result is that we're going to hear that single note playing as quavers. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So rather than having that single note like that, it's like a delay really, isn't it? So it's triggering as quavers, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now I said I'd talk about the speed and the mult controls, A and B encoders. It's a bit hard to figure out these settings, and so I'm going to try and, like I say, demystify this for you a bit now. Now I use the BPM settings on the mult because if you go past those settings, so the BPM disappears, you get the same settings but without a BPM on top, and BPM is obviously beats per minute, so these settings are synced to the tempo. Okay, so I recommend using those rather than the ones that don't have BPM on first. What I'll do, I'll put the kick drum in as well. And you hear that's perfectly in time. Alright. Now if I change the tempo, you'll hear it all work together. It slows down with it and speeds up with it. So that's all working beautifully. But if I go to 32 without the BPM on top, like that, it'll work fine at first. But if I change the tempo, listen to what happens. It goes out of time, you see. So it's definitely worth using using, in my opinion anyway, the BPM 32. Now we've got a few favourite settings here you might want to remember or jot down. If I push down on the A encoder for the speed, you can see that's set to 32. The MULT is set to BPM 32. So as I've already shown you, you get a quaver pattern, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In other words, the LFO completes one cycle of its waveform every 1/8, every quaver. Right, that's dependent on that mode setting, that trig setting. Remember, I had it set to trig, and I'm going to leave it on that for now. I'm not professing to be an amazing LFO expert, but I'm trying to get you up and running so you can use this without having your brain burnt too much. Now, if you hold the function key down and rotate the A encoder, you get some pretty useful settings. Because obviously if you just rotate the A encoder without doing that, it just goes up and down in whole numbers and decimals. So if I hold the function button and do that, it jumps to some useful settings. See? 8, 12, 16, 24, 32, 48, and the maximum again, not 64 as you would expect, but 63.99. Put it back on 32 for a minute. This multiplier on the B encoder is set to 32. If I just rotate to the left and put this on to 16, now we're going to get crotchets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. See? So that's a useful setting to remember. 32 on the speed, BPM 16 gives you crotchets. Remember, this is turning the amp volume up and down. So we're getting those little pulses of volume. Let's move the multiplier the other way to 64. Notice it jumps. Now I'm going to get semi-quavers. If I slow the tempo down quite dramatically, it's going to give me 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a semi-quavers. Okay, so that is speed 32, multiplier BPM 64. With the speed control, if I put this on 12, 24 or 48, let's say 48, these settings give us triplet fills. Put our BPM back to 32, and now we're going to have quaver triplets. So you've got 3 notes per beat. If we bring the speed down to 24, I'm going to use the function control so it jumps to it, and put the MULT up to 64, same thing, quaver triplets. See? So if I leave the speed on 24 and bring the BPM down to 32, I'm going to get crotchet triplets. And in the same way, if I bring the speed down to 12 and bring the BPM up to 64, I'm going to get the same thing, crotchet triplets. Right, let's reset what we had. So 32 here and 32 here. Now this fade control, which is on the C encoder, I could fade out. So if I turn this to the right, see that line is coming down, set this to 30, and what you'll hear now is that the effect starts and then fades out. Actually, I think it's probably easier to hear that on a triplet fill. Let's put that on 48. And obviously you can have degrees of that. And it can fade in. Let's bring the depth down. You can hear that starting as a solid signal and then breaking into that pulse as it fades in. See? Quite subtle, isn't it? And if you want to reset the fade, hold function, rotate the C, and that's off, and we'll bring our depth all the way up again. Right, let's put this back on 32, and we've got what we had before. So that's the fade control. So there's a practical example. We're only using one modulator, one LFO at the moment. It's great fun once you understand it, but it's a bit of a torment all the while you don't, so hopefully this will help you. Let's go to modulator 2, 2 of 3. This is set off, the depth is off at the moment. So we're going to leave all the controls the same, the trig, the sin, the filter and the amp, effects. So this time the destination is amp pan. See, amplifier, pan, so it's going to pan. So the LFO, the modulator, is going to make the sound pan from left to right with this setting. Again, I'm using my good old friend, the square wave. I've got the trig mode on trig, so let's turn this up and see what we've got. See on the depth all the way up. You can hear that it's panning from right to left. So the result is that you hear two notes in the right speaker followed by two notes in the left. This is because with the SPD, the speed set to 32 and the multiplier set to 8, you get the effect in minims with the notes in the same speaker every other beat. So if you like, it's right, left, right, left, right, left, you see? So right, left, right, left. You see? So if you turn the depth to maximum negative, it will start in the left speaker. See? Left, right, left, right, left. Let's bring the depth to maximum positive, and let's change the BPM to 4. So with this setting, we will get the note in the right speaker once on beat 1 and the note in the left speaker once on beat 3. Right, left, right, left, right, left. So we've got two modulators, two LFOs working. One is changing the volume over time, one is changing the pan over time. Let's go to modulator 3, and this is set to FX del. So we're on delay send, so the amount of the sound that's sent out to the delay. Now if I turn up the depth control, let's see what happens. You can hear the delays in there. Now if I go into the effects setting, hold function and effects, I'm on the delay. I'm going to turn the feedback up, see what happens then. Be careful of this, so it intensifies. I could also try changing the filter here on the delay. So it's pretty impressive, isn't it? You've got this single note, which has come out of this for a moment, this single note here with three LFOs working on it. The first one is changing the volume over time, the second one is changing the pan over time, and the third one is changing the amount sent out to the delay over time. And all these controls can alter all those different modulators, all those different LFOs. So, I mean, it's just incredibly powerful, isn't it? That's just one track in one pattern. So that is that sound, that hidden tier sound. Let's come to our mutes. Let's get rid of that for a minute. Let's look at the hi hat track, which is this one here. So let's make sure we've got that track in focus. You have to be careful because there I've muted the other tracks, unmuted this, but I'm still on track 9. So track 3, hi-hats. Now at the moment, it's just modulator 1 I'm using. Here I've got the speed set at 32, I've got the BPM set to 8, no fade, I've got a random waveform, the mode is set to 3, and the depth is on, I think, pretty low. Now the destination is amp decay time, so the decay time of the amp is going to be changing over time. So press play, just hearing the hi-hat. I can make it quite severe. It's too much, you see, so sometimes less is more. I don't want to go too crazy with it. Put the kick in as well. On the kick drum track, you see it's BD gimbal. This is a sound that comes as a stock factory preset in the Digitone II. If I go to the LFOs, you'll see they are already set. This one is Sin Mix, Mod 2 Depth, Sin Pitch. So on the third modulator there, that is modulating modulator 2's depth control. So there's the sound of the kick drum. If I reset the modulators so they're not working, so now listen to the kick drum. It's quite weak and weedy, isn't it? So those modulators are really definitely doing something to the sound there of that kick drum. Notice I pressed function and no to reload. Let's have a look at the snare drum sound here. Again, if we go through the modulators, you'll see modulator 1 is synth pitch, 2 is synth mix, and 3 is the amount of reverb. I put that one in myself. Let's go to the mutes and just put the snare drum on. Notice how that reverb jumps up every now and again. It's just making your sequence sound less boring, less predictable. Now if we go to the 5th track, right, on this sound I'm using an LFO the depth control. If you hold function and turn the H encoder, it goes to max positive, max negative, or off. Let's go to off. It's quite sensitive, that. Just rotate it up slightly. So listen to the sound. No modulation. And get that wobble. And that is using that sine wave there. So it's a very, very fast pitch change. Just some other sort of geeky stuff which you might find interesting. I'll keep this really short. This waveform here, which is on encoder E, you've got all these different waveforms. The triangle wave, the sine wave, the square wave, which I used a lot, the saw wave, similar sort of results, exponential, curve, ramp, random, and obviously they all work differently. This ramp that only lasts for the first half of that waveform cycle. So that SPH, that start phase, if you look at the waveform you'll see it changing where it actually starts, and you can see a numerical readout there up to 127, so obviously that's going to affect things. You'll get happy accidents yourself just by twiddling things, trying things out. This G encoder changes the mode, and this obviously controls how the LFO works when a note is triggered, and Obviously free is free running. So in this mode the LFO runs continuously. It's never restarting or stopping even if notes are re-triggered. Trig mode restarts the waveform when a note is triggered. Hold, this one here, it's a sample and hold mode, which is free running in the background, but it latches to specific points when a note is pressed, and it's really good if you've got a random waveform on. The 1 setting restarts the waveform when the note is triggered, and it only runs for one cycle of the waveform, and half does the same but only goes up halfway through the waveform. I hope you found this video interesting today and useful. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. If you'd like to give me a helping hand, a donation on YouTube here, or preferably on my website, which is www.daddylonglegs.com. That's always very gratefully received. I really thank those people who've already done that. So like I say, thank you very much for watching, and you'll see me in my next video.